Okay, we are on Mem Zayin Beis 47b. Okay, we're Misha Robu Balei Hana. It's about halfway down the widest lines. First one in the line is Baitkin Nisha Sechem. Now we talk about the decline of civilization, especially of Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, and around the destruction of the first and second temple. Now we'll get to now soon enough. Okay. Yeah. Misha Robu Balei Hana. As soon as the Balei Hana, people that sit down and just enjoy having pleasure seekers. So nisavsu hadinim v'niskaklu hamaysim. So judgment was upended and action was ruined. Ve'ein noach ba'olam, and there's no rest in the world. Now, the reason here is because the dayanim, the judges, are too lazy to actually pursue justice. Pursuing justice requires work, and these people are just the couch potatoes.
Maybe they defunded the judges.
Yeah. So because these people don't want to work, so therefore it ruins the judgment. God does not have a benefit and does not enjoy the world because judgment is not being pursued correctly. When people started to be, they started showing favor and judgment. These people would because of their honor and their power, they would try to change the course of the judgment. So the idea of being fearless in judgment was ended. Upasak sakiru, and the difference of the idea of not showing favoritism stopped. Uparko ol shemayim, they removed the yoke of God. V'nosnolem ol basar v'dam, they took on the yoke of men, and that's because that now all of a sudden it becomes about political affiliations and nepotism. When people started, the lawyers started whispering to the judges, there was a tremendous amount of anger against the Jewish people. And the Shechina departed. In the presence of God, there's judgment. But once you have these people, these lawyers whispering to the judges, so that ends the process of judgment, and God is angry. When there was an increase in the amount of people pursuing money, there was an increase in the people that would say to evil that it is good, and they would say to good that it is evil. There started to be more complaining in the world. Misharabu Moshche Haroik, when there were these Rabu Hayahirim, so these people were prominent people, and when they would walk, they would spit, sort of the way that an arrogant man might do so. So the Gemara says, indeed, Rabu Hayahirim, the people that were arrogant, increased. That is Maitu HaTalmidim, and there were less students. And the Torah looks around to try to find someone who will study it, but they can't find anybody. That's because the students, in order for a student to actually appreciate Torah knowledge, he has to be humble. When you had a lot of these arrogant folks, the women, the girls started looking up to them. Because the generation has that has such arrogance, people only look at the outside, the surface layer. So the Gemara says, it's not the case. For somebody who puts on a full sense of arrogance, even his household, his wife, will not accept it. Even inside his house, people won't accept him. So how could it be that you have these arrogant people and it results in the girls chasing them, chasing the arrogant folks? If it says the arrogant people are not accepted by even their wives, so the Gemara says you're right. Mikara kavtzala. Initially, everyone runs after the arrogant folks. L'saif mitzel. Eventually, they are unimpressed with their arrogance, haughtiness, and they turn away from them. Misha Rabu Matile Miloy al Balabatim. These are judges that ask their what today you'd call a congregant. They ask their Balabatim, the people that work to take care of their money. So when that happens, Rabba Hashoichad, there's an increase in bribery, Vatias Mishpat, and changing the judgment, Upaska Toiva. And because of that, the good has ended because people are not judging properly. When people started measuring who owes who favors, there was an increase in people doing whatever they wanted to do, because as long as they owed enough favors, nobody would ever criticize them. I'm sorry. Was there a question? No. Okay. Shvalim hugbu v'hagvayim hushpalu. They humbled the great and they made mighty those that didn't deserve it. Malchus the Ozla ben Avla, and the kingship was falling apart. It was being despised. Misharabu Tsaria Ayin the Tarfit Tarif, when the Tsaria Ayin are stingy people. What's perfect Tarif?
Miserly people who grabbers of soil.
What was that?
Miserly people and grabbers of spoil increased.
Got it. Robbers. There we are. Okay. Tarif is robbers. So you have misers and robbers. So you had an increase in stubbornness. 1 second. Yeah. And people refused to loan money because they were concerned that nobody would pay them back, and they became stubborn to provide benefit to the poor because they're not sure it's actually going to go to the poor people. But over yeah, the prohibition not to that one is obligated not to withhold from giving to a poor person. When another form of haughtiness and arrogance increased, these people they're next prominent to Mishakris Ayin. Let's say that. Chakras ayin is sort of flirtatious behavior. Rabu mayim hamorim. There was an increase in the amount of people that needed to be checked for Sotah. El Shaposku, but they had to end it because it was too common, and therefore they ended the practice. Mishurabu mikable matonis nismaitu hayam finiskatzur hashanim. When there was an increase in more people accepting gifts, the days got shorter and the years got shorter. Because the verse states, someone who hates gifts will live. Evidently, a society that's constantly giving each other gifts has a shorter lifespan.
These gifts more in the line of bribes.
Sorry?
Are these more in the line of?
No, I don't think so. I would say this is 1 second. Check over here. I'd say the initial gifts are much more bribes. These are just regular gifts. Misha Rabu Zechuche Halev Rabu Machleges B'Yisrael. Zechuche Halev is translated exactly as the haughty-minded students. These are people that did not pay attention. They sort of knew that they understood and didn't listen very well. So that what that resulted was an increase in machlokes. The students of Shammai and Hill became many. And they had this problem. They did not properly attend to their rabbim. In other words, to learn from them exactly what their opinions were. So then, Rabbi Machlokes B'Yisrael, we said between Shammai and Hill themselves, there were only 3 debates. But between the students of Shammai and the students of Hill, there were many, many debates. That was because they weren't carefully attentive to what their rabbis had told them. But as the Torah became like 2 Torahs. When the Jewish people started accepting charity from non-Jewish money, this is all euphemistic. The Jewish people were on top and the non-Jews are on bottom. It's actually the opposite. The Jewish people are on the inside and they are on the outside. And like we said before, this is the opposite. It's actually the opposite. When Yossi ben Yezer died, we lost Eshkolos. What's Eshkolos? My Eshkolos, Amar Yehudah, Amar Shmuel, Ish Shakol Bay. A person who everything was in him. These were rabbis that had every sort of beneficial trait necessary to be a rabbi. Okay. Yochanan Kohen Gadol Hever Hadiyas HaMaiser. Yochanan Kohen Gadol ended the Vidi HaMaiser. What is Vidi HaMaiser? Twice a year, it's the end of the 4th year and the 7th year. There's a concept called Vidi Maiser. We spoke about the tithes. We spoke about the fact that so we said there is truma, right? There's meiser of meiser. Truma's meiser is taken off, and there's meiser sheni or meiser ani, depending on the year. They have to be dispensed with accordingly. So at the end of the 4th year, one makes a statement. After 3rd year after Pesach, after the 3rd year Pesach, he makes on Pesach. He makes a statement that he dispensed with everything accordingly. Rabbi Yochanan ended the practice. My time, we don't give it correctly. So truma, like we said, goes to a kohen. Meiser is supposed to go to a Levi, and the Levi takes off 1/10 of that, which is called trumas meiser, and gives it to a kohen. Now, we'll get to it. Actually, not that long. But roughly a little less than half a year. We will discuss when Ezra returned to Israel, the Levium refused to return, and the penalty of that was that he took away Meiser from the Levium, and Meiser began to be given to Kohen. So Rebbe says if we're not giving it correctly, we will stop saying the confession of the Meiser that happens every 3 years. Okay, so the Gemara says V'loy Ashar, make a video on the rest of the Meisers. Omer Shlogosh Kol Bayis She'em Misvad Al Meiser Rishon Shuvein Misvad Al Shar Meisers. If you don't say video on Meiser Rishon, you don't say video on any of the Meisers. My time, what's the reason? Omer Baya Hoyel Baz Bayakos Tchila, because the Torah begins the discussion of Yom Meiser with a statement about Meiser Rishon. So that's considered the main one. Okay. And because the Meiser Rishon is the most important one, you can't say on a Meiser Rishon, you don't say it on anything. So Gemara asks, okay. Hold on a second. So you mean to tell me the reason why we don't say Vidi Meiser is because we're taking off Meiser Rishon? Evidently, that means that we're taking off Meiser Rishon. That can't be. What's the problem? The problem is that Rabbi Yochanan was the one who began the debate of Dmai. In other words, he saw that people would take off just Truma, but not Meiser. Right? He saw that the common folk would only take off Truma. In regard to Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni, some would take off, some wouldn't. So he said, tell everybody, just like Truma, the violation of Truma incurs the penalty of death. So too, Trumas Meiser and Tevel also has the penalty of death. So he went ahead and decreed anyone who buys fruits or vegetables from the common folk, so he has to take off Ma'aser Rishon and Ma'aser Sheni, because he's not sure if they were previously taken off. And Ma'aser Rishon from the first Ma'aser, Mafresh made a Trumas Ma'aser. You take off Trumas Ma'aser, V'naisis L'kayin, Ma'aser Sheni Olav Eichel B'Yerushalayim. Ma'aser Sheni he goes and eats in Jerusalem, because that's what you do. Ma'aser Sheni, Ma'aser Rishon and Ma'aser Ani, Ma'aser Rishon and Ma'aser Ani. Hametzim Mechaver Al Varaya. Okay, and this is true today. So a person buys a product in Israel, he doesn't know if Ma'aser was taken off. So what does he do? He takes off Truma, he throws it in the garbage because he can't eat Truma. Then he takes off Ma'aser Rishon, and of Ma'aser Rishon, 10% goes to Trumas Ma'aser, which also goes to the garbage because even the Kahanim can't eat it because the Kahanim are not B'Tahara, right? But the Ma'aser Rishon, he doesn't know. Maybe Ma'aser Rishon was taken off. So Ma'aser Rishon he's allowed to keep for himself. So hold on a second. Why are we saying that we take off Ma'aser Rishon and give it to Kahanim? We don't even give it to Kahanim. We keep it for ourselves. We separate it, but we keep it. So Gemara says Tarti talk, and moreover, not only were they not giving it to the Kayan, they weren't taking off the Ma'aser Rishon in the first place. That's why they had to make this decree. So Gemara says Tarti talking to me 2 decrees. First thing he did is Bittul Vidi de Chaverim. He ended the confession of even scholars that would take off Trumas Ma'asers. And second, because of Ma'ashal Am Haaretz, he made a decree on Maya up in Am Haaretz that it cannot be used. That you need to take off Ma'aser Rishon, Ma'aser Sheni before you use it. The Afu Bittul Atzma Ayron Vesanaikfen. He ended the process of Ayron and Naikfen. What is Ayron? My Ayron. Every day the Levim would stand on the Duchen, that's the podium, and they would sing to God, and they would sing Ura Lamasishin Hashem, awaken God, why do you sleep? Amar Lahens, he said, does God sleep? The verse states, God, the protector of the Jewish people, doesn't slumber, doesn't sleep. Okay, so what's the interpretation of the verse? In other words, when the Jewish people are facing tragedies and the non-Jews are enjoying themselves, so then we pray to God and we say, Hashem, God, awaken, why do you slumber? But obviously in the case of Rabbi Yehudah in his time, that reality wasn't present. The Jewish people at least were managing fine. And therefore, there was no reason to say Hashem. He also ended the process of Neikfen. What's the process of Neikfen? Okay, so what was going on here? Okay, well, we'll soon see there's a few variations of this, but Neikfen basically was a process of getting an animal to subdue before it was ritually slaughtered. So you have someone who brings a sacrifice to Beis Hamikdash. Remember, a sacrifice can't have any blemishes in it. There's no blemishes would invalidate a sacrifice. So they had to subdue so what are the ways they would do? They would try to subdue the animals. They would make a cut above the eye, and blood would run down into the eye, and the animal would be sort of temporarily blinded or couldn't see well, and then they would become much more submissive. So that was the way they were able to slaughter it, basically. He came bottle. He ended the practice. Why? Because it looks like it's a blemish. The Mesni Satana, another version of the Bryce is another version is they would hit the animals. They would bang them between the eyes until they fainted, and then they would slaughter the animals, just like the non-Jews do. So Rabbi Yehudah said to them, until when are you going to feed animals that weren't slaughtered to the Mizbeach? So the Gemara says, Nevelis, animals that weren't slaughtered, they did slaughter them. The Gemara says, El Treifus. It means that these animals were not kosher. Why? Maybe the membrane of the skull was penetrated by the hit, and therefore the animal won't live for 12 months, and it's not kosher for a sacrifice. So what did he do? He created these rings in the ground where the animal's neck was anchored. Blacksmiths were able to work in Chol HaShamayid. He ended the practice. Even if a blacksmith needed to work because needed the money or it was time pressing, he would not allow blacksmiths to work because they make too much noise. Nobody needed to ask any questions about Mai because they knew what to do. You had to take up Meiser, Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni. So Mara says Kedamoran, like we explained. Okay. Misha Botl Sanhedrin, Botl Hashir. From when the Sanhedrin ended, then song became prohibited. From houses of restaurants, theaters, etc. Party locations. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, the shir with music, you should not drink wine. There's a prohibition on live music and drinking wine. Misha Mason Vim Harishanim, when the earlier prophets died, Batlu Urim V'Tumim. Familiar with the Urim V'Tumim was? Familiar with the Urim V'Tumim? Just very briefly. The Kollel had a breastplate. In the breastplate was God's name. I believe it was the name of 72 letters. Which is there were three psukim of each of 72 letters in Parshas Shalach. The first one was written out in order, the last one was written in order, and the middle one was written out backwards. Those three verses are the name of the 72. Anyway, this name would be written and put inside the breastplate, and it would turn the breastplate sort of into this prophetic device. The Kohen would ask either a king or a general would be able to ask the Kohen the exact process. The Kohen would turn around. The general or the king would ask a question, and every letter of the Aleph base was inscribed in the breastplate, and the answer would be illuminated. Each letter comprising the answer would be illuminated briefly. Now the problem was that it had to be unscrambulated as well, which took some amount of skill. If you didn't unscrambulate the letters correctly, you can get the wrong answer because the letters did not light up in the correct order. Okay, so when the earlier prophets stopped, the Urim V'Tumim ended. When the Beis Hamikdash, the temple was destroyed, Botl Hashamer, the Shomer worm, which we'll talk about soon, ended. V'Noifes Tzufim. Noifes Tzufim is the honey of a honeycomb. We'll explain that as well. Pasku Anshi Amana, and the end of people of integrity. There stopped being people of integrity. Yisrael, from Jewish people. Shenemar Shia Hashem Ki Gomer Chassid, because the Chassid, the Chassidim, those that were served Hashem properly more than they were supposed to, have ended. Shmuel says, "Hey, Bishur said, Miyom Shechar Beis Hamikdash Ein Yom She'ein B'Klala. There isn't a day without a curse. V'Yard Hatalat Levracha, and the dew doesn't come to revivify the land. The Nidl Tama Peros, and the taste of fruits and vegetables was taken away. Also, the fat of the peros the fat of the fruit was also removed. It stopped. The fact that people stopped keeping the laws of Tum and Tahara, that took away the flavor and the smell of the fruits. The fact that people stopped keeping meisers, not los hashumin, it took the fat. Hadogan, shuman hadogan, the fat of the grain. We'll see in the Gemara what this means. It sort of means a very sweet and tasty grain. The Chum says, has nusvak from sorcery and promiscuity. Kilo as a kol, it destroyed everything. Okay. So the Gemara says when the Sanhedrin ended, it became prohibited to hear live music at a party. So the Gemara says, how do we know Mishavatla Sanhedrin? How do you know that the verse of Bashir Layish Yayin is talking about after the Sanhedrin ended? The verse states, Zakanim Mishar Shavasu. This is a verse in Eicha. When the Sanhedrin ended stopped appearing at the gate. There was no longer a Sanhedrin. The young stopped playing their songs. So this is evidently a reference that there is a positive commandment not to listen to music at a party after the Sanhedrin was disbanded. The Gemara explains, Amar Rav, Udin Deshama Zimra Te'akar. An ear that hears music, that ear should be uprooted. Amar Rava says, Zimra B'Beisa, Churva B'Seifa. If there's music in the home, it results in destruction. Shenemar, Kol Yeshar B'Chalain. If there's a song that's being sung in the window, Cherev Basaf. There is a sword at the end. Ki Arza Allah. My Ki Arza Allah. What does Arza Allah mean? Rav Yitzchak bias afilu bias himself Rav Yitzchak asks bias himself barozim irhu. In other words, does it mean that a house surrounded by cedar is a city? El afilu bias himself barozim misraya. Even a house surrounded by cedar, its foundations will shake and the house will come down. Amar Rashi says, Shema Minaki Maskal Churva B'Seifa Maskal. When a house is destroyed, it's destroyed by the entrances and the exits first. Shenemar Cherev Basaf. The Cherev is in the doors. The Baisim B'Hacha in other places. The Shia Yugas Shar. And destruction, the destructor will destroy the gates. Amar Rashi. Now Shia is also the name of a destructive angel. So Rashi said, I saw this destructive angel called Shia. Umenaga Kitura. He destroys like a mad ox. Amar Rav Huna. Zimra de Nagdi the Bakri Shari. The song of the boatswain, the shipmen with the Bakri and those that guide the animals is permitted. The Gardoi, those that weave, is also prohibited. Rav Huna bottle Zimmer. Rav Huna banned music in his town. Come Mea Avzi Bezuzi. There was a sale for 100 ducks for 1 coin. Umea Sachid Bezuzi, and 100 measurements of wheat for 1 coin. And people said it was too expensive. In other words, there was a tremendous deflation of prices. Also, Rav Chisda came to that town, and Zilzal Bey, he did not properly enforce the rule. People tried buying 1 duck for 1 zuz, and it was too cheap. Nobody would sell it for that price. Rav Yosef says, Zimri Gavri V'Aninashi. If the men are singing and the women are answering, pritzusa. It's pritzus. It's not becoming for such a thing to occur. However, Zimra Nashi, if the women are singing V'Ani Gavri and the men are responding, that's a tremendous level of it's a tremendous breach in the proper difference in the proper separation of the genders to prevent promiscuity. Okay, the Ma'anaf Kamina, what's the difference whether something is unbecoming or potentially extremely damaging? The Ma'anaf Kamina, the Betuli Hamikami Hath. One has both practices to stop. Which one should he stop first? Okay. Rav Yechon says, if somebody drinks with these 4 types of instruments, they bring 5 sets of tragedies to the world. Shenemar, woe is to those that wake up in the morning, they chase wine. Till late in the afternoon, the wine keeps them up. These 4 instruments. The yayin mishtayam. And why they're drinking. And they don't follow the word of God. What is the next verse? And therefore my nation will go into exile. They cause exile. They bring a hunger to the world. People are searching out for Torah and can't find it because Torah is forgotten. Vayishach Adam vayashbel ish. Shgarman shiftless l'saynek shakadosh baruch hu. Ve'ein ish shakadosh baruch hu shenemar Hashem ish mechama. They decrease the honor to the enemies of God. Again, this is a euphemism. It doesn't mean the enemies of God. It means the opposite. They decrease honor to the enemies of God. The eneg vayam tishbal. 1 second. They cause the Jewish people to be despised. What does the verse say afterwards? Lachain, top of 48b. Harchiva sha'ol nafsha, widen hell your soul. Para pia, and open your mouth. Without limitation. And presumably these people should enter you. Yeah, okay. So let's just summarize here. Practically speaking, there is a prohibition on, most places understand this prohibition to be prohibition on live music where wine is being drunk. Now, if there's a reason for the congregation, such as it's a Sudas mitzvah or something like that, it's a siyum, it could be that would be an exception. But in principle, this is still certainly today a valid, something to keep in mind.
So there should be no wine at weddings.
No, wedding is mitzvah. But but it's most places understand it's live music. So some the very high end restaurants have live music and serve wine. There are so much shachas that they will not certify such an establishment.
They will not what?
They won't certify an establishment that has live music and serves wine. So most wedding halls, these types of events, typically they have some sort of mitzvah component to them. So it's a charitable event. There's a mitzvah component there as well, right? It's charity, it's mitzvah. You're celebrating the good work of whatever the charity organization does. So, okay. And most places understand it's a prohibition specifically of live music. Okay, Misha Mason Avim Harishanim. When the early prophets died, the Urim of Tumim ended. Man Avim Harishanim, who were the first prophets? Amar Rav Huna is David, Ushmuel, Shlomo. This is David, Samuel, and Solomon. Rav Nachman Amar, they made David, Zimn and Solek, Zimn and Loy Solek. In the time of David already, sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't work. Sharei Shal Tzadik v'Olsalei, Shal of Yosef v'Lei Olsalei. Shenemar v'Yal of Yosef. So one of the things when King David was running away, he ran away from his whole life. I think he was running away from Absalom, and they asked Avyasar. Avyasar was the Kohen Gadol, and they asked him to get an answer from the Urim Tumim, and the Urim Tumim did not respond to Avyasar. So Avyasar was sacked, and Tzaddik HaKohen was placed in his stead. The interesting thing that happened, of course, is that Avyasar ended up joining quasi rebellion against Shlomo Melech taking over. Right, he joined Adoniyahu. And Yod tried to usurp the kingship instead of it going to Shlomo, it should go to him. And Avyasar joined the party because he wanted to be the Kohen Gadol. And he was sacked under David because the Urim Tumim would not respond to him. Masav Rabbi Bar Shmuel asked, "Vayhi lidrosh elikim kol yemei Zechariah, hameven v'rois elikim." During the days of Zechariah, they would be able to ask God questions. Lav, my lav, what's it talking about? Urim Tumim, it's talking about through the Urim Tumim. Samara says, Loi, Benavim, it's talking about through prophets. Toshma, let's try to bring in other proof. Meshachar Beis Hamikdash Rishon, Bodlu Ori Migrash. The cities for the Levium ended. There was Upaska Urim Tumim, and the Urim Tumim stopped. Upasak Melech and Beis David, and there were no more kings from the house of David. If someone will tell you, Vayemer, okay, so this is where we mentioned before, Ezra gathered up the people and brought them back to Israel. So we'll see this in Kedushin as well. But one of the things it says is that there were certain people that they did not have the book of Yuchsin with them. Nobody knew. They claimed to be Kahanim, but they couldn't demonstrate how they were Kahanim. So they said, "You're no longer Kahanim until the Kohen could stand in front of the Urim and Tumim." So hold on, this is Ezra. This is coming up to build the second Beis Hamikdash, and there's an Urim and Tumim. Because he's saying that you're going to come, you're not a Kohen, but we'll ask the Urim Tumim, and the Urim Tumim will decide if you're a Kohen or not. So Gemara says, no, that's not what it means. If somebody's going to bring you this verse, until the Kohen checks them out, the Urim Tumim, what it actually means is, like a man tells his friend, until the resurrection occurs. And the Messiah comes. Basically means never. Doesn't mean that actually put them in front of the Urim Tumim, because there was no Urim Tumim. It's just a nice way of saying never. El Omer of Nachman bar Yitzchak. Okay, but regardless, this brayso seems to indicate the Urim Tumim ended following the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. So Gemara says, you're right. Man Avim Rishonim, Hu Avim Rishonim, Lafukim Mechage Zechariah Malachi Dachroinim Dinum. It means for the whole length of the first Beis Hamikdash there was an Urim Tumim until its destruction. When we had the next group of Levium, Chage Zechariah Malachi, were not included in the first level of prophets. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Mishamesu Chage Zechariah Malachi, when Chage Zechariah Malachi died, Nistalka Ruach HaKodesh Yisrael. There used to be a sort of divine inspiration, and that inspiration stopped once they died. The Alpha became, and despite this, there was a heavenly voice that would sometimes inform them of certain realities. So the Gemara gives a few examples. They were sitting in the attic of Beis Goria, in the city of Yericho. A heavenly voice was placed on them from heaven. So they said, there's somebody sitting here who's so righteous that God should be placing his presence on this person and communicate with him directly. But his generation is not worthy of having someone of such a stature. They put their eyes in Hil HaZaken, and they recognized that Hil HaZaken was the one who the heavenly voices refer. Shemeis, when he died, his bidu, they eulogized him and they said, Hey Chassid, hey Anav, Talmidei Shel Ezra. Here is a Chassid, a humble person, the student of Ezra. Yishuv B'Macheres, a similar story happened. They were in Yavne in the attic. The Nosal and Baskim and Shemayim, and a voice was placed on them. Amar had said, Yesh B'chem Adam Echad Shiroi Shetishra Shechina Olav. It's somebody who's sitting here who's worthy of having God's presence rest on him. But except for the fact that his generation is not worthy of it. They put their eyes on Shmuel HaKatan. When he died, his bidu, they eulogized him, and they said, "Hey, Anav, hey Chassid, Tamida shall hell." This woe is to we've lost. Here is a humble person, Chassid. He did more than he was supposed to. A student of hell. It's interesting. Shmuel, what was Shmuel HaKatan famous for? He wrote the prayer of Elam Shinim. They needed to write a prayer. Nobody was worthy of. Nobody was at the level that they were able to write a prayer except for Shmuel HaKatan. Okay. When he died, he had some sort of divine inspiration, and he said, Shimon v'Yishmael, the great scholars of Reb Shimon and Reb Yishmael, l'charova, they will be taken out for destruction. V'chavroy and their friends l'ktola, they will be murdered. V'shar amal leviza v'akan sagi, leviza, everybody else will be captured and be looted. V'akan sagi and asidin l'meisa alama. And great tragedies will occur to the nation. This happened presumably before the destruction of the temple. So, and this prophet sort of prophetic insight occurred right before the destruction. The Af Rabbi Yehudah ben Bava Bikshulaim, Hey Chassid, Hey Anav. They wanted to say that Rabbi Yehudah ben Bava was also a great Chassid, a great Anav, a humble person. Hello. The opportunity did not present itself. Rabbi Yehudah ben Bava was executed by the king. He was one of the Asara Harugim Malchus, one of the 10 scholars that were executed. And one does not eulogize somebody executed for the king because the king executed him. Someone executed by the king is not eulogized because it would seem that we're sort of disagreeing with the king's decision. And it could result in, arguments of being a traitor. Okay, let's continue. From when the temple was destroyed, the shomer worm was stopped. What is this shomer worm? This is the worm that Shomer Melech used to build the Beis Hamikdash. How he got the worm, God willing, we'll get there in about a month and a half. Very interesting story. Very, very interesting story. He had to capture the king of the demons, tell him where the worm was. And then he had to get to the worm, which is also an impressive feat in its own right. Okay. Shenemar, Yeah, Shnemar, as the verse states, when the temple was built, Evan Shlema Masa Nifna, complete stones were used to construct it. Hadvarim Kiksavan, Devar Rabbi Yehudah. This the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah is that the stones were hewn from rock and put into the building, straight. How did he cut the rock in a way that the cuts would be perfect? He used this worm. This is a sort of a miraculous worm that was able to cut through stone. Okay, 1 second. Lord Nechemia said to him, it's possible to say this. Like for Nemar, the verse states, Kollel avanim yikaris, meguroris b'megero. It says in the verse that these stones were processed. They were cut down once they were hewn from the rock. And came out so what does the verse mean? They did not use iron in building the temple. They didn't do it inside the Beis Hamikdash. They would do it outside. Okay, Amar Rabbi says, near and Rabbi Yehudah ba'avnei mikdash. Rabbi Nechemia ba'avnei beisai. 1 second. Okay, so what? 1 second. So Rebbe says that with regard to building the temple, it seems that Rabbi Yehudah is correct. It was built complete stones. And Rabbi Nechemia was correct in terms of building the house of King Shlomo, the palace. Okay, so the Gemara says according to Rabbi Nechemia that they were able to hewn the stones outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Shamar l'mayal. So what do they need the shamar for? So the Gemara says these stones, there were 12 stones on the breastplate and 2 stones on the apron. 14 stones total. They have to be engraved. So you can't write on it with ink because it has to be engraved. The aim is but you can't use a chisel to cut, to engrave. The stones have to be complete. The right one needed to be written in ink. And the shomer worm was placed on top of the ink. And it would sort of expose. It would engrave the rock, the stones, without losing anything. Like a fig, it sort of expands in the summer months. It opens up, but it's not missing anything. Second. Yeah, like a valley that cracks in the winter, but nothing is missing from the mass of the valley. Okay, Tanur Rabbanon. Shomer Zeb, this shomer, Briosik Isaira. How big is the shomer worm? It's the size of a grain of barley. It was created in the sixth day of creation. The ankle over kosher yachal lama b'fanav, and nothing hard can stand in front of it. So what's the obvious question? Very good. How exactly do you keep it? How do you transport it? How do you store it? So the Gemara says, you wrap it in tufts of wool. You put it in this vessel of lead, malaya subi sa'iron, filled with rice bran. And that rice bran is very soft, and therefore that softness results that the shomer does not penetrate the lead. Ravami says, Mishacharav Mikdash Rishon, but Shira Parnoda, Uskuches Levana. This is a white, a special type of silk and a white glass. Tanya Nami Hachi, we learned in the Bryce as well. Mishacharav Mikdash Rishon, Butla Shira Parnoda, a special type of silk was lost, Uskuches Levana, and a white glass, Varecha Barzlan, an iron chariot. Apparently, there was a certain type of chariot they had then, which was not available after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. And some say this is a special type of congealed wine, which is like thick like jello. But it's wine. It's intoxicating. Okay, stop her. Okay,
Oh.
great day, and